During an excavation at the abandoned Westmore Psychiatric Hospital in northern Vermont, an archivist found a sealed metal container hidden behind a false wall. Inside was a single vial labeled Vitae Serum 1945. When one drop accidentally fell onto the heart of a deceased lab rat being used in a demonstration, the heart began to beat again. Dr. Eleanor Wright, chief medical historian at New England Medical Archives, couldn't believe what she was witnessing. The tiny heart, which had been motionless for nearly 3 hours, suddenly contracted, then again, and again. The steady rhythm of life emerging from dead tissue made her drop her clipboard. The sound of plastic hitting the tiled floor echoed through the silent laboratory as 23 pairs of eyes shifted from the beating heart to her pale face. "This is impossible," she whispered, leaning closer to the specimen. The rat had been thoroughly examined and declared deceased earlier that morning. Its body had already begun to cool, rigor mortis setting in across its small frame. Yet there on the dissection tray, exposed and free from its body, the heart continued to beat. Not in the erratic spasms sometimes observed in post-mortem tissue subjected to electrical stimulus, but in the methodical, purposeful rhythm of life. Dr. Wright had spent 15 years studying historical medical experiments. She had documented hundreds of unusual treatments and experimental procedures from the 19th and 20th centuries. But nothing in her extensive research had prepared her for what she was now witnessing. What made this moment even more disturbing was that the serum had not been deliberately applied to the heart. It had been an accident, a small drop falling from a cracked vial as she carefully examined the historical artifact. The Westmore Psychiatric Hospital had been abandoned since 1973, its corridors and treatment rooms left to decay as modern medicine moved away from institutional care. The excavation had been routine, part of a historical preservation project aimed at documenting the practices of early psychiatric care in America. Dr. Wright had been called in to catalog the medical items discovered in a previously sealed wing of the building. The metal container had been found behind a false wall in what appeared to be a private laboratory, separate from the hospital's main facilities. Inside were 5 glass vials, 4 of which contained only dried residue. The 5th still held approximately 1 milliliter of a clear, slightly viscous liquid. The label, yellowed with age but still legible, read, Vitae Serum, 1945, Dr. H. Blackwood. Dr. H. Blackwood. Even among medical historians, the name was largely unknown. Prior to this discovery, he appeared only as a footnote in Westmore's employment records. His official position had been listed as research physician, but there was no record of any published papers or recognized contributions to the field. According to the limited personnel information, he had worked at Westmore from 1943 to 1946 before disappearing from official records entirely. As the rat's heart continued to beat on the tray, Dr. Wright instructed her assistant to document the phenomenon on video. Her hands trembling slightly, she carefully placed the cracked vial into a secure container. This would need to be analyzed immediately. What could possibly cause dead tissue to resume function after such a prolonged period? The heart continued beating for 3 hours and 22 minutes, Dr. Wright later recorded in her official report. During this time, it maintained a regular rhythm indistinguishable from normal cardiac function, despite being completely separated from any blood supply, neural connections, or other biological systems necessary for sustaining life. The discovery triggered an immediate investigation into both the serum and its creator. A research team was assembled, combining experts in historical medicine, biochemistry, and pharmaceutical archaeology. Security protocols were established, and the entire project was classified under a special research directive. The first breakthrough came when researchers discovered Blackwood's private journals hidden in a compartment beneath the laboratory floor. The notebooks, water-damaged but partially legible, revealed a disturbing picture of a brilliant but increasingly unstable mind. In his early entries, Blackwood wrote with the precise language of a scientist. March 3, 1943. Initial experiments with adrenal extracts show promise. Specimen A responded with increased cellular activity for 4 minutes post-mortem, awaiting delivery of additional compounds from Zurich. But as the pages progressed, his writing became more erratic, the handwriting increasingly unsteady. December 12, 1944. They don't understand. None of them understand what I've discovered. Death is not absolute. The threshold is permeable. The body knows how to live. It wants to live. It simply forgets. My serum helps it remember. The most disturbing entry came from his final documented experiment. February 15, 1946. Subject 17 responded to the serum. Cardiac function resumed after 9 hours of clinical death. Respiration followed. Brain activity detected at 0300 hours. But what returned was not subject 17. The eyes were wrong. All wrong. It recognized me, though we had never met. It spoke a name I have never shared with anyone at this institution. Project terminated immediately. God forgive me. 3 days after this entry, Dr. Blackwood vanished. Hospital records indicated he had taken an unexpected leave of absence and never returned. No resignation letter was filed. His personal belongings remained in his office. The only thing missing was his research. Dr. Wright's team worked tirelessly to analyze the serum's composition. Initial spectrographic analysis revealed compounds that defied conventional classification. The substance contained organic elements, but structured in configurations that no team member had ever encountered before. It's as though the molecular structure is incomplete, Dr. Lena Patel, the team's biochemist, reported with visible unease. These compounds shouldn't be stable, yet they are. And there are elements here that don't correspond to anything in our database. As the analysis continued, a pattern emerged in Blackwood's research subjects. Hospital records revealed 17 patients had died under his care between 1944 and 1946, an unusually high number for a single physician. More disturbing still, the death certificates for these patients had all been signed by Blackwood himself, with burial arrangements handled directly by the hospital rather than released to families. "We need to locate these graves," Dr. Wright insisted during an emergency meeting with hospital administrators and local authorities. If Blackwood was experimenting on patients, the exhumation orders were approved within 48 hours. A section of the hospital's private cemetery, unmarked and overgrown with decades of neglect, was identified as the likely location. As the excavation began, tension hung heavy in the cold Vermont air. No one spoke above a whisper, as though afraid to disturb whatever might lie beneath the frost-hardened soil. The first coffin was located exactly where hospital records indicated Subject 1 should be. But when the wooden box was carefully raised from the earth, everyone present knew something was terribly wrong. The coffin was unnaturally light. Inside, they found only a hospital gown, folded neatly, with a small metal tag bearing the patient's identification number. The coffin was empty. So was the second, and the third. All 17 graves contained nothing but empty coffins and folded hospital garments. Whatever had happened to Blackwood's subjects, they had not been laid to rest in the hospital cemetery. The investigation took an even more troubling turn when researchers discovered a hidden chamber beneath Blackwood's laboratory. The room, approximately 15 feet square, contained what appeared to be a surgical suite. But unlike standard medical facilities of the era, the bed at its center featured heavy iron restraints. Scratch marks covered the inside of the metal cuffs. The walls, painted a sterile white, bore faint brownish stains that forensic testing would later confirm as human blood from multiple sources. Most disturbing of all was a journal discovered inside a locked cabinet in this underground room. Unlike Blackwood's scientific journals, this appeared to be a personal diary. The entries, often rambling and incoherent, spoke of thresholds crossed and the spaces between life and death. On several pages, Blackwood had sketched what appeared to be human anatomical studies, but with disturbing alterations. Additional chambers in the heart, strange neural pathways that corresponded to no known structure in human biology. "They move among us now," read one particularly troubling entry from January 1946. "I see them sometimes in town. They remember nothing of the procedure, nothing of their former lives, but something else remembers. Something else looks out through their eyes. As researchers continued to analyze the serum, unusual incidents began to occur in the laboratory. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Temperature fluctuations were recorded despite the climate control systems showing no irregularities. Several team members reported feeling watched when working alone. Dr. Patel was the first to experience physical symptoms. After spending several hours analyzing tissue samples treated with minute quantities of the serum, she developed a severe migraine accompanied by auditory hallucinations. "I keep hearing whispers," she confided to Dr. Wright, "like someone standing just behind me, speaking words I can almost understand." Within 24 hours, 3 other researchers reported similar experiences. The decision was made to implement enhanced safety protocols, including mandatory breaks every 2 hours and a requirement that no one work alone in the laboratory. Despite these precautions, the situation deteriorated rapidly. During a routine experiment, a laboratory technician named Michael Chen collapsed while handling a diluted sample of the serum. Witnesses reported that just before losing consciousness, Chen's eyes rolled back in his head, and he spoke several sentences in what sounded like Latin, a language he had no knowledge of. Chen was immediately hospitalized. His condition stabilized, but he remained unconscious for 3 days. Upon waking, he had no memory of the incident or the moments leading up to it. More concerning were the results of his neurological evaluation. "His brain activity is unusual," the attending neurologist reported. "There are patterns in his limbic system that don't correspond to normal human responses. It's as if certain neural pathways have been rewritten." Chen was placed on medical leave and kept under observation. Meanwhile, analysis of the serum continued under heightened security measures. The research team managed to isolate several compounds, but approximately 30% of the substance's composition remained unidentifiable through conventional methods. What they did discover was disturbing enough. The serum contained elements similar to neurotransmitters, but with molecular structures that would allow them to cross the blood-brain barrier with unprecedented efficiency. There were compounds that appeared designed to affect cellular mitochondria, essentially hijacking the energy production mechanisms within cells. Most concerning were structures that resembled viral capsids, suggesting the serum might be capable of delivering genetic material directly into cells. "This isn't just a stimulant or a preservative," Dr. Wright explained during a briefing with university officials. "It's as though someone designed a substance specifically to rewrite the fundamental processes of life at a cellular level." The question that haunted the entire team was simple. How had Blackwood created such a substance in 1945, when many of the biological principles it exploited weren't even discovered until decades later? The answer began to emerge when researchers located Blackwood's earlier academic records. Before joining Westmore, he had spent 3 years studying in Switzerland under Dr. Heinrich Vollmer, a controversial figure in pre-war European medicine. Vollmer's research had focused on what he called biological persistence, the study of how certain organisms could survive in suspended animation under extreme conditions. What wasn't widely known was that Vollmer had also been fascinated by ancient alchemical texts. His private collection, much of which was destroyed during the war, had contained manuscripts dating back to medieval Europe, as well as translations of even older texts from Arabic and Persian sources. One name appeared repeatedly in both Vollmer's and Blackwood's notes: al-Jaldaki, a 13th-century alchemist who had written extensively about an elixir he called the water of life. According to surviving fragments of his work, al-Jaldaki claimed to have discovered a substance that could restore the vital essence to that which has been abandoned by the spirit. Modern scholars had dismissed these writings as typical alchemical metaphors, but what if they weren't metaphorical at all? What if al-Jaldaki had discovered something that defied scientific explanation even 7 centuries later? As the investigation continued, researchers began to uncover a disturbing pattern of incidents surrounding Westmore Hospital in the years following Blackwood's disappearance. Local newspaper archives revealed an unusually high number of missing persons reports in the area between 1946 and 1952. Most were dismissed as people leaving to seek opportunities elsewhere after the war, but the concentration of cases around Westmore was statistically significant. Even more troubling were reports of strange behavior among some local residents during the same period. Church records from a parish near Westmore contained a priest's private notes about parishioners who seemed changed after recovering from serious illnesses. "It is as though someone else looks out through their eyes," the priest wrote, echoing Blackwood's own disturbing observations. The investigation took yet another unsettling turn when Dr. Wright received an anonymous package at her university office. Inside was a faded photograph showing a group of men in military uniforms standing alongside several civilians in lab coats. The image appeared to have been taken sometime in the late 1940s or early 50s. One of the civilians was unmistakably Dr. Harmon Blackwood, older than in his Westmore identification photograph, but clearly the same man. He was standing next to a distinguished-looking military officer whose insignia indicated the rank of colonel. Written on the back of the photograph in faded blue ink were the words, "Project Lazarus, initial phase completed." Dr. Wright immediately contacted government archives to request any information about a classified project under this name. The response came not from the archives but from a special department of the Department of Defense. 2 agents arrived at her office the following morning. "Project Lazarus doesn't exist in any public record," the senior agent explained after ensuring the room was secure. "And, officially, this conversation isn't happening either." What they revealed, however, filled in critical gaps in the Blackwood mystery. Following his disappearance from Westmore, Blackwood had been recruited by a classified military research program focused on combat survivability. His work on the Vitae serum had somehow come to the attention of military intelligence who saw its potential applications. The goal wasn't resurrection, the agent clarified. It was creating soldiers who could survive otherwise fatal injuries long enough to receive medical care. Blackwood promised them a serum that could keep a fatally wounded soldier functional for up to 6 hours after injuries that would normally cause immediate death. The project had been shut down in 1953 after a series of incidents that the agent refused to elaborate on. All research materials had supposedly been confiscated and secured at a specialized facility. Blackwood himself had been placed in protective custody at a location that remained classified. "What's disturbing," the agent continued, "is that according to our records, all samples of the serum were destroyed in 1954. The fact that you found an intact vial suggests either our records are incomplete or someone deliberately preserved a sample outside official channels." As the conversation concluded, the younger agent handed Dr. Wright a sealed envelope. "This arrived at our office yesterday. It's addressed to you, though no one seems to know how the sender knew you were involved in this investigation." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "The serum is not what you think it is. Blackwood didn't create it, he found it. Ask yourselves, if the 17 subjects aren't in their graves, where are they? And more importantly, what are they now? I would strongly advise destroying any remaining samples before they find you. Once they know you have it, they will come. A friend." The note was unsigned, but forensic analysis would later determine the paper and typewriter characteristics were consistent with technologies from the early 1970s, around the time Westmore Hospital was abandoned. Despite mounting concerns, research on the serum continued. The team had managed to synthesize a small amount of what they believed to be a neurotransmitter component of the original formula. Animal testing began under strict containment protocols. The first test subject was a laboratory rat that had been euthanized approximately 12 hours earlier. When administered a minute dose of the synthesized compound, the results were both immediate and horrifying. The rat's body convulsed violently. Its eyes, clouded by death, suddenly cleared and darted around the enclosure. Most disturbing of all, its movements displayed a deliberate intelligence that went far beyond normal rodent behavior. It systematically tested the boundaries of its enclosure, focusing on potential weak points in a manner that one researcher described as disturbingly methodical. When a technician approached to adjust a monitoring device, the rat turned to track her movements with unnerving precision. According to multiple witnesses, it then stood on its hind legs and made a gesture that several team members independently described as almost like it was beckoning to her. The technician, Dr. Sarah Levine, experienced an immediate severe headache followed by dizziness. As she stumbled backward, blood began to stream from her nose and ears. By the time medical help arrived, she was unconscious. She died 17 minutes later from what was initially diagnosed as a massive cerebral hemorrhage. The autopsy, however, revealed something far more disturbing. Dr. Levine's brain showed patterns of neural activity that persisted for almost 3 hours after clinical death was pronounced. EEG readings taken during this period showed organized wave patterns inconsistent with standard postmortem neural discharge. It was as though her brain was still processing information, the pathologist reported, visibly shaken. There were delta wave patterns characteristic of deep information processing, despite complete cardiac arrest and cessation of respiration. The project was immediately suspended. All remaining samples of the serum and its synthesized components were secured in a specialized containment facility. The research team was placed on administrative leave with mandatory psychological evaluations and medical monitoring. That should have been the end of the investigation. But 3 days after the lockdown, Dr. Wright received another anonymous communication. This time, a text message from an untraceable number. "They're awake now. All 17 of them. They know you found it. Lock your doors, but it won't help." They don't use doors. That same night, security cameras at the research facility recorded a power fluctuation at exactly 3:15 a.m. For approximately 7 minutes, all systems went offline. When backup generators restored power, the vault containing the serum samples had been breached. The serum was gone. Security footage showed no intruders entering or leaving the building. The vault's access logs registered no entries. The sophisticated biometric locks showed no signs of tampering. It was as if the samples had simply vanished. 2 days later, Dr. Michael Chen, the technician who had collapsed while handling the serum weeks earlier, disappeared from his hospital room. Nurses reported checking on him at midnight, finding him asleep. By their 2 a.m. rounds, his bed was empty. Like the serum, he had vanished without triggering any alarms or appearing on any security footage. As the investigation deteriorated into a series of inexplicable events, Dr. Wright began to notice strange details in historical photographs from Westmore Hospital. In group photos of medical staff from the years following Blackwood's disappearance, certain individuals appeared with subtle but distinctive abnormalities, pupils that reflected light at unusual angles, postures that seemed just slightly wrong for their builds, expressions that didn't quite match the occasions being commemorated. Most disturbing of all was a photograph from 1962 showing the hospital's administrative staff. Standing in the back row, partially obscured but still recognizable, was a face that appeared identical to one of Blackwood's missing subjects from 17 years earlier. The man had not aged a day. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in the form of a journal, delivered to Dr. Wright's home address in a weather-beaten leather case. The journal's pages were brittle with age, the handwriting matching samples of Dr. Blackwood's from his earlier work. But the dates of the entries began in 1973, nearly 30 years after his supposed disappearance, and continued until 2011. The journal detailed Blackwood's growing horror at what he had unleashed. The serum, he explained, had never been intended to restore life. Its true purpose was far more sinister. What Blackwood had discovered in ancient alchemical texts was not a formula for resurrection, but a method for what he called facilitated inhabitation. "The serum doesn't bring back the dead," he wrote in one particularly disturbing entry. It prepares abandoned vessels for new occupants. I thought I was restoring life. Instead, I was opening doors that were meant to stay closed, creating pathways for something else to enter our world. According to Blackwood's later writings, the entities that took possession of the treated bodies retained access to the host's memories and could mimic their personalities convincingly. But they were not human. They never had been. They come from somewhere else, he wrote. Some plane of existence adjacent to ours but fundamentally different. They cannot maintain physical form in our reality without a prepared vessel. The serum creates such vessels by restructuring cellular material at a fundamental level. Blackwood had spent the remainder of his life tracking the 17 subjects who had returned after his treatments. He documented how they had integrated into society, taking positions of moderate influence in various fields: medicine, law enforcement, local government. None achieved significant public prominence, but all secured roles that gave them access and authority within their communities. More disturbing still, he found evidence that they were subtly altering their environments, introducing trace amounts of compounds similar to the original serum into local water supplies, modifying food products from the businesses they controlled, even developing beauty products containing diluted versions of certain components. They are terraforming, Blackwood wrote in his final entry, dated just 6 months before the discovery at Westmore. Not in the dramatic fashion of science fiction, but slowly, methodically, at a cellular level. They are preparing our world for something or someone. The journal ended with a warning, written in a shaky hand that suggested Blackwood had been in failing health. If you're reading this, you found the serum. Destroy it. Destroy all record of it. They've been watching me for decades, but I've managed to keep this journal hidden through means they wouldn't understand. My time is ending. My natural time. I've refused their offers to help me continue. I've seen what continuation means. Death is not the enemy. Sometimes it's the only defense we have against things far worse than dying. 2 weeks after receiving the journal, Dr. Wright noticed a man watching her house from across the street. He was there every evening for 4 days, always in the same position, always perfectly still regardless of weather conditions. On the 5th day, she decided to confront him, crossing the street with determined strides. As she approached, the man smiled. It was a perfect smile, too perfect, with teeth aligned with unnatural precision. But it was his eyes that made her stop several feet away. They reflected the streetlight at an angle that was physically impossible, as though the light were being bent inside his pupils rather than reflected from the surface. "Dr. Eleanor Wright," he said, his voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "We've been looking forward to meeting you." She took an involuntary step backward. "Who are you?" His smile widened slightly. "I think you already know the answer to that question. I'm Subject 17, the last one Dr. Blackwood treated before he reconsidered his work." "What do you want?" Dr. Wright asked, her mouth suddenly dry. "Nothing you need concern yourself with. We simply wanted to thank you for finding the last sample. We've been searching for it for quite some time." He tilted his head in a motion that seemed to involve more vertebrae than a human neck should contain. "You've contributed to something wonderful, Doctor. In time, everyone will understand." Before she could respond, a car turned onto the street, its headlights briefly illuminating them both. When the light passed, the man was gone. Not running away, not ducking behind cover. Simply gone, as though he had never been there at all. That night, Dr. Wright gathered every document, every sample, and every note related to the Westmore discovery and locked them in a secure facility under a false designation. She then distributed encrypted copies of Blackwood's journals to trusted colleagues around the world, with instructions to make them public should anything happen to her. The investigation officially remains open, though active research has been suspended indefinitely. Dr. Wright continues her historical work, though colleagues note she now refuses to conduct research after dark and has developed a habit of checking reflections in mirrors and glass surfaces, as though looking for something that doesn't belong. As for the 17 subjects, their whereabouts remain unknown. But in small towns and quiet suburbs across America, there are reports of people who stand too still, whose smiles never quite reach their eyes, who sometimes speak in voices that carry strange harmonics just at the edge of human hearing. And in certain communities, residents occasionally report an odd taste in the water. Nothing concerning enough to report to authorities, just a slightly metallic flavor that wasn't there before. By the time anyone might think to investigate, those who noticed it first have usually stopped mentioning it. They've adapted, they say. They barely notice it anymore. They feel better than they have in years. What would you do if you found a mysterious serum in an abandoned hospital? Would you have the courage to destroy it, knowing what it might contain? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark medical mysteries from history. And remember, if you suddenly start seeing people who stand too still or whose eyes reflect light at strange angles, it might already be too late.